what I thought I would do, it's my responsibility, I suppose, to not only inform you, but to entertain you. And I've given a variance of this talk so often, it usually takes about 2.5 hours, but I won't spend that much time. I only have 50 minutes, they say, for this presentation. So I'll tailor it according to the way the clock is ticking, and if I feel that I'm stepping my welcome, I will just skip ahead. But this will be a random walk into the cold fusion and new energy age, which we're about to enter. This age is based on, if I have my geography correct, the two giant oceans, infinite oceans that we see here, the ocean of water around the planet and the ocean of infinite space around us. It's of course all part of the same thing, but we now know for sure, as I followed the cold fusion story, that there is an energy source within water and that it will be commercialized. It is being commercialized. We're not talking will anymore. It is being commercialized even as we speak. And I have been persuaded in recent years, thanks to the tireless efforts of people like Hal Fox, whom I consider my mentor, who helped me make my cold fusion transition when I was chief science writer at the MIT News office, that there are machines now, irrefutable, that do produce over unity conditions and even self-sustaining conditions. Maybe I need that extra 0.1%. I really want to see the self-sustainer on the table with the light bulbs glowing, and I want to see it on the market, and I know we will see it on the market. So I'm just about there on that side of things, and let's talk about how those things might be related. But before that, how did I get into this crazy business to begin with? Well, I'm an engineer with some credentials. You know, MIT and Harvard, but those don't mean anything because so many people with credentials are mentally dead, especially many MIT professors. Okay? You know, I have great respect for my alma mater, MIT, but a serious travesty of justice and scientific ethics and almost any dimension you want to mention has occurred at MIT, and we'll get a little into that. But I was the chief science writer after working as an engineer for many years and beginning to write books and articles for things and Washington Post and what have you. This was before cold fusion. And I just happened to be at the right place at the right time, or the wrong place at the right time, as the chief science writer at the MIT News office on March 23rd, 1989, when Pons and Fleischmann announced their amazing conclusions. And of course, there's a huge story. I wrote the book Fire from Ice. And I concluded in 1991, when it was published, that the evidence was overwhelmingly compelling for the existence of the phenomenon. I didn't realize how rapidly it would be commercialized. I surprised myself. I said then that hot fusion and cold fusion would turn the oceans into bottomless fuel tanks, but of course hot fusion is doomed at this point, and cold fusion will triumph much faster than anyone could possibly have thought, including myself back then. Let's define things. Cold fusion is the unknown phenomenon, we still don't know exactly what it is, that gives rise to excess power and nuclear effects in metals in contact with liquid and gas media that contain hydrogen and its isotopes. There are probably a dozen or so methods of doing cold fusion now. This isn't a technical lecture, so I won't get into it all. But what we have confirmed, for sure, is that in numerous experiments, the release of energy is orders of magnitude beyond any chemical or storage mechanism. This is just impossible. And it's amazing that the physics community and the mainline scientists can't get orders of magnitude straight. We're talking megajoules per mole. They can't get that straight. Of course, what they do is they say, since we can't explain it, your data has to be wrong. There are nuclear products that have been confirmed, and the nuclear products are getting more and more bizarre. You saw Dr. Mizuno's work that Dr. Craven showed. We're going to be publishing that in the next issue of Infinite Energy. We've published other work by Mizuno and others. And there's no question that tritium, neutrons, charged particles, helium-4, and now transmutations of heavy elements at very low input energy is occurring. There's no commonly accepted explanation, overwhelming rejection, yet an immense scientific and technological revolution is in progress. A little background here. as to what the context of this is. The world is got plenty of fossil fuel energy to continue some kind of escapade for a while, at least for a fraction of the population. But here's the population. Here's what's happening to the energy consumption if we just have a population that stabilizes at 10 billion in the next, well, sometime in the future. It'll probably happen faster than that. Here's the shortfall from the fossil fuel reserves to the world population if it goes to 15 billion, and there's just nothing that fossil fuel can do, nothing that even breeder reactors, which of course won't be built, can do. Hot fusion would have taken care of this, but hot fusion is so problematic, and now it's definitely not going to be built. By the way, this is a slide that came from a hot fusion person working at, I think, Lawrence Livermore. Okay, Eric Storm. Well, we have to use some of the old. Anyway, the old has been trying for years, and I supported hot fusion. Ever since I was a kid, age 16, I saw the Russian exhibit at the Montreal World Fair, and I was impressed with the tokamak development, etc., which, by the way, the US hot fusion people denied. They denied that the tokamak was real until it was shown that it was real. So these hot fusionists in the United States aren't very good at changing their paradigms. They've got this huge reactor at Princeton, which is now nicely irradiated with tritium that they introduced last year, I think it was, and we'll have to pay another 100 million or so to get rid of it and bury it someplace. These big lasers, all to mimic the sun, but that was the wrong paradigm. The paradigm was not to mimic the sun, that was their paradigm. The paradigm was to get energy out of water. And when Pons and Fleischmann gave them that on a silver platter in 1989, they rejected it because they wanted to imitate the sun, and they were too close to the sun. Yes, hot fusion is the energy of the future and always will be. That's the old joke. All right, this is a very prescient and brilliant man, Freeman Dyson, who wrote Infinite in All Directions, and I quoted him in my book, Fire from Ice. He had it right on the nose even before Pons and Fleischmann. He was talking, I think, about solar power and other things. No reason why a new paradigm, a new technology needs to have 30 years to develop. It can go fast if it's small size units, simple design, and mass production and a big market. All of that characterizes cold fusion and new energy. So thank you, Freeman. I'm waiting to hear from him. I think he, as brilliant a man as he is, he does receive a complimentary copy of Infinite Energy, and he knows who I am, certainly, but he is too afraid to even write to me. He's probably afraid I will quote him. But, and he wouldn't know how to write the letter, okay? Here are two devils, heroes, who stirred things up, and I must tell you, I did not believe cold fusion was real for quite a while. It took me a year till the first conference in Salt Lake City, which I attended, to believe that this announcement that was being made 12 hours before the Exxon Valdez ran aground on March 23rd, yep, amazing synchronicity, were real. I mean, you know, I just felt that maybe it was a mistake, but it wasn't a mistake. The evidence became overwhelming. And in fact, we can thank Drs. Pons and Fleischmann for having the courage to persevere. Unlike this scientist, I'm on the verge of a major breakthrough, but I'm also at that point where chemistry leaves off and physics begins, so I'll have to drop the whole thing. Thank you, Drs. Pons and Fleischmann, for not dropping the whole thing, because, and it's great that you had a press conference, painful as it's been to all of us, including yours truly, because it unleashed a worldwide investigation, which led to many other discoveries, and now even the cold fusion field is inexorably linking up with new energy, and we are discovering a much greater picture. They just had the tip of the iceberg. If they'd published it in an obscure journal and said, oh, it's something interesting, no one would have done a thing about it. They would have said, of course, it's a mistake. Their intuition was correct. They are heroes. If they do not win the Nobel Prize, I suggest that we abolish the Nobel Prizes. Okay, they won't. I don't think they will win it. Okay, and they don't give them posthumously. While the experiments were going on, we had, the Exxon Valdez was right at that time frame, and we had the seals and the otters and so forth up in near Alaska, Prince William Sound, and asking, any more word on how those fusion experiments are going? This became the cold fusion problem. This is a summary of the whole question, schematically shown. What was this phenomenon? At any given time, it could have been any one of these things. It could have been nothing, which has been called pathological science, searching after something that didn't exist, but getting false data readings and so forth. This always was, or mostly after the first year, was complete nonsense, but it's still being repeated by the Department of Energy and New York Times, just all sorts of people who don't know what they're talking about. It could have been just low-level nuclear products like Steve Jones originally claimed from BYU, but who's now disavowed his results. Coward that he is. I should be careful. You know, many of these people have been terrorized by the own monster that they unleashed, and it's really a human tragedy. In particular for a man like Steve Jones, who had such envy and greed against Pons and Fleischmann, such bitterness was arisen. Perhaps the wounds will be healed someday, but who knows? Some people thought heat only and the nuclear stuff is nonsense. Maybe the heat was just chemical, although it was orders of magnitude beyond chemical explanation. Then some people even suggested that they might be separate phenomena, unconnected in the same palladium lattice, but unconnected. I thought that was absurd. I always felt that it had to be unified, and I think we will find that it is a unified phenomenon. Not necessarily that the nuclear products explain the excess heat in an E equals mc square sense, although it may, but that they are connected. It could be the tapping of zero-point energy, and the nuclear products are merely the kind of collateral ash that's being seen. I'd actually like to think of it that way, because that will help us go to the stars, if that's really the case. We have probably free energy generators anyway. And the various explanations, of course, in a different way of looking at it, pathological science, obviously not, unknown chemical or mechanical phenomenon, impossible, orders of magnitude, inappropriate, nuclear reactions with products commensurate with excess power. That's what the stodgy cold fusion establishment now believes. There is a cold fusion establishment, believe it or not, which shows how human organizations work. They don't torture us and insult us, but they do generally believe that, and they don't like to hear about ZPE or machines that spin without noticeable input. The other possibility is something even more wonderful. Nuclear products are just auxiliary to the heat effect. The central lesson for me, which of course I knew already intuitively, but this has not penetrated the scientific establishment. This is not apparently taught well enough in school. In fact, it's not taught at all. That you cannot use theory to reject experimental evidence, no matter how compelling the past theory. Okay? See, it's amazing. It's amazing we even have to clap about that realization, brilliant realization. That's what we were all supposed to believe as card-carrying scientists, right? Well, the card-carrying scientists at universities, especially MIT, I know that's the worst example of it. They don't know that. Or they say they think it, but they don't act it. Extraordinary claims, this is a little takeoff on Carl Sagan. They do not require extraordinary proof. They require proof. And that's it. And I aspire to write a book about my ex-friend Carl. I'm not an enemy of Carl, but he knows who I am, and I do send him the magazine routinely, and I did quote him in my book, and he was quite open-minded when he spoke to the science writers at Cornell University in 1990 or so, 1990 or 91. He was very open-minded about it, but he has done nothing to publicize anything about it, and I think it's disgraceful that a man with his potential for changing opinion cannot investigate the subject and come to his own conclusion. God Almighty, come to a cold fusion meeting. You know, we have them in nice places like Maui, and you know, the last one was Monte Carlo. Buzz Aldrin was there. Hey, maybe Buzz will bring Carl along next time. All right, what happened after the announcement was an incredible furor of activity, media activity. On one day, May 8th, 1989, it made Newsweek. It made Time, and by the way, if anyone has the color cover, I've been searching for this for a long time. I want the color cover of the May 8th Time. Send it to me and I'll send you the magazine back. I need to make a color slide of it. And it was also on the cover of Business Week, Miracle or Mistake, a scientific detective story. One of the most incredible scientific stories of the age, very appropriate coverage for such an amazing claim. But you know, cold fusion had appeared in the press before this. I don't know whether you knew this. The first time it was used, actually, was in the New York Times in 1956, December 29th. That was the so-called muon-catalyzed fusion that was talked about back then, a simpler method of coming up with a fusion reaction, using muons to catalyze. And that was called cold fusion, which Steve Jones was involved in. But there it was on the back page someplace, cold fusion of hydrogen atoms. Then the whole story disappeared right after the big furor in the spring of '89, and everyone thought, well, MIT and Caltech and Harwell have disproved it. Department of Energy is going in the negative direction. It's becoming a comedy of errors, etc. We don't believe it. Jerry Bishop of the Wall Street Journal kept on plugging away at it. He won a prize for the American Physical Society writing prize on his cold fusion series. They gave him the award, but they wanted to take it away before they gave it to him. They just said, listen, guys, at the award ceremony, and I have the tape, they said, don't write about, just one thing, Jerry, you're a good writer and so forth, but if you write about cold fusion in the future, be sure to say it's nonsense. Words approximately to that effect. There was a hero, one Nobel laureate, who was no longer with us. He became a very deep friend of mine, Julian Swinger, so I want to honor him here. He died last year, and he stood up for truth. He didn't know whether the data was correct. He was a theorist, a brilliant man, but he felt, what if the data is correct? How would it work? And he used his brilliant mind to write numerous technical articles about it, which were rejected by the American Physical Society publication, so he resigned from the American Physical Society. And because he was a member of the National Academy of Sciences, he could publish for free without any peer review in the proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. He published in some German journal, and I believe in English, they said in a preface, of course, Julian Schwinger deserves to be able to talk about anything he wants, and we're proud to have him on our pages, etc., but reader be warned, this might not be true. I'm paraphrasing it. So it was like a caveat, a sort of a consumer warning, be careful, this cold fusion might lead to confusion. And he said in Tokyo around the time of the anniversary of Pearl Harbor, he said there's little hope for it in Europe and the United States. In the West, it is to the East and especially to Japan that I turn. He was speaking at a Japanese institute. I think he was too pessimistic about that. Even though it is indeed far more attacked and suppressed in the United States, the entrepreneurial spirit in the United States will triumph. We have numerous corporations and individuals who persisted and will not give up and will destroy the opposition. We're beginning to. To summarize the evidence for cold fusion would be so difficult, you'd really be here for hours on end doing it. But just a few little teensy highlights here and there that I grabbed out of my giant slide pile last night. Look at this. This was dug up. This influenced Otto Reifenschweiler from Philips Laboratories in Holland to dig this up. Reduced radioactivity of tritium in small titanium particles. He found this evidence 30 years ago, and he rejected his own evidence, or he didn't have time for it. But now he published it in Physics Letters A in '94, and he came to one of our cold fusion meetings in, I think it was Monaco. Oops. Not to belabor the point, but he shows that radioactivity can change with temperature. Can you imagine? The tritium counts, the beta counts, were declining, then they went up again. And he even measured the pressure of tritium in this Geiger counter. There was no evidence that the tritium, this line of pressure of tritium, was declining, so it wasn't just being outgassed. The tritium counts were being somehow affected by the lattice of the little nanoparticles that they were in, and then they came back up. But now we even have evidence, copious evidence, that heavy element changes that last can exist. This is both an interesting scientific commentary as well as a political commentary. Here's our own Los Alamos National Laboratory with an internally peer-reviewed paper that was allowed to go out. Tritium evolution, that means production, from various morphologies of palladium by Tuggle, Clater, and Taylor at Los Alamos. The fact that the director of Los Alamos National Laboratory is not taking the production of tritium, which is an ingredient in nuclear weapons, seriously, is a scandal. Just think about it. I mean, if this is right, forget whether it is right, but suppose it were right. Don't we have all sorts of things in our intelligence community that they should be looking at? And whoever the director is at the moment, the fact that he's not taking action on this, I think, will ultimately become a very serious dereliction of duty. That is an issue when Congress eventually investigates. I'll try not to go too far into this, but the whole thing is heavy Watergate. That's how you characterize it. After the cold fusion war is won, as it will be won before too much longer, perhaps somebody will allow me to write a book called Heavy Watergate, and maybe I'll get paid back for all those things that I lost for resigning from MIT and not making the big bucks all those years. This is the guy on the right, the Darth Vader of cold fusion, John Huizenga, who is most responsible, the single individual who is most responsible for the disaster of cold fusion in the United States. He was asked by the federal government, Bush, down to Admiral Watkins, Secretary of Energy at the time, on to some other individual, to head a panel to investigate these claims of cold fusion in the spring of '89. He told them, don't even bother having a panel. And he writes this in his book. His book is called Cold Fusion, the Scientific Fiasco of the Century. It's beautiful. He confirms everything we knew and more. He said, don't have a panel. But of course, a few weeks later, when cold fusion wasn't going away, his God-ordained or science-ordained mission in life was to kill cold fusion. And so he took up the responsibility. His co-panelist, Norman Ramsey, was much less involved and is a hero, I think. He tried to resign on the last day of the panel. By the way, the panel pretty much came to its conclusions in 3 months, even though numerous experiments were still underway. Positive data was rolling in. Huizenga wanted it killed completely. Ramsey threatened to resign. No national news media reported that, even though it was a public meeting. And he got instead a kind of a preamble in the report that said, well, you know, we can't tell it for sure that it's nonsense, and there might be some studies that should be done between positive and negative groups. They should get together, etc. The whole thing was a charade and a farce, because let's face it, when the Department of Energy issues a negative report, it's believed. And so cold fusion was in effect killed by DOE and above all Huizenga. If Huizenga had just been a tiny little bit more, or maybe a lot more open, and had just left it as an open question in science, everything would have been fine. The New York Times would then have been required to write about it, right? And the Nature magazine would have been required to follow the unfolding story. But this gave them permission to make a joke about it, which they did. And of course, John Maddox was one of the worst joke makers. He appeared on, the editor of Nature magazine, he appeared on the NOVA program against cold fusion and other programs subsequently. He said, I think that broadly speaking, it's dead, and it will remain dead for a long, long time. He felt, with all due respect, I practiced that British accent for a few years. It's not quite authentic, even with all my discussions with Chris Tinsley. Chris would give a much more entertaining talk. I wish we could bring him in next time. Okay. This was Steve Koonin at Caltech. We are suffering from the delusions and incompetence of doctors Pons and Fleischmann. This is just part of the cold fusion war and interesting things that happened right about the time that my book came out. Theoretical physicist Frank Close of England did the book Too Hot to Handle, in which he pretty much said that Pons and Fleischmann were frauds. They had shifted their gamma curves to indicate that they had neutrons, which is baloney. He won't give up that fraud theory. He's proud of that fraud theory. It is totally wrong. And I say about Frank Close's book, he wasn't even frank and he wasn't close. So many people have heard that now that I always fear that it's going to fall flat. Nature was beautiful. During the time of the third International Conference in Nagoya, I attended all the conferences except the one at Como, Italy. I was so fed up with MIT and the disaster there after I resigned in June of '91. I just got into an RV, not cold fusion powered, and went across the country, visited Hal Fox and lots of other national monuments at the time, and just had to get away. Oh, I didn't mean that you were a national monument. That kind of, although Hal should be a national monument. But look at this, Nagoya. I mean, here's Nature pontificating on October 29th, '92, referring to the NTT laboratory in Japan helium result. It says, NTT researchers have no paper published or submitted to back up their claim of helium. The company's public relations department could not even provide an abstract for the announcement. They were not there at the conference. They didn't care about the truth. They didn't issue a correction. They are dedicated to falsehood, at least on this subject. But it all began with my formerly esteemed colleagues at MIT that I used to serve as a publicist, or propagandist, should I say, for hot fusion. In the week prior to May 1st of 1989, the director of the Plasma Fusion Center at MIT plotted to plant a story. The Boston Globe was too favorable to cold fusion for his tastes. You know, they feared that $25 million might be shifted by the Congress to cold fusion research that was asked. And so they wanted to axe it, okay? So he got Nick Tate, the reporter from the Boston Herald, which is a tabloid and not always relied upon. Yeah. Okay. George Weissman needs to go to registration immediately. Urgent message, okay? Sorry to bring that. But in any event, they plotted with Nick Tate. They gave him dirt. They gave him dirt. I didn't know about this. They told him pretty much that they had determined that Pons and Fleischmann were frauds, okay? And he used the word schlock science. Fortunately, it was on tape. The interview was taped. Nick Tate wasn't intending to tape it, but when he heard Parker joyously talking to his colleagues at other universities like Richard Garwin and so forth, he was talking to Garwin at the time, oh, we got him now, and so forth. Got him with their pants down or whatever it was. Fraud, fraud, fraud. The word was used 5 times. Of course, Nick pressed the tape button, which is perfectly right when you're a reporter and Parker saw the tape running. But when the story finally came out and the words fraud were in there, that is, Parker attributing word fraud attributed to Parker, he got afraid because he thought Pons and Fleischmann might sue him. But he was glad that the effect happened. This was the first instance of a person calling Pons and Fleischmann a fraud in public. And the very next day, May 1st, the day that this was published, that evening actually, Pons and Fleischmann were hung in absentia at the American Physical Society meeting in Baltimore, Maryland. All the reporters believed that they had been killed off completely, and you can thank Ron Parker for allowing the use of the word fraud to enter the lexicon. Tate was nearly fired on the spot by the editor because, of course, the MIT professor would be believed over a junior reporter. And I didn't even believe the junior reporter. I was totally deceived. I was asked to write a press release to deny this reporter, to in effect destroy his career if he didn't have the tape. It's a big story. You could write a whole story on just that one incident. And here's Parker the next day at our hastily called press conference to explain what he really meant. And it was much sweeter then, okay? And he was still saying, oh, he was quoted out of context and so forth. But the Herald was outraged, and so they published a transcript of the real tape the next day, part of it, the key part, and Parker told me, oh, this is totally out of context, it's baloney, Tate is a viper, and so forth. These people, by the way, Parker makes $200,000 a year of your money studying hot fusion. How's that? And now I only learned about the depths of that later on. I didn't get the full picture. Tate gave it to me, and I was shocked. But there was yet another revelation to come. There was a party for awake for cold fusion. On June 26, 89, I was sort of sad. I thought maybe the Plasma Fusion Center was right. Cold fusion really was nonsense. I was sad. I was working on the book. You know, Fire from Ice just followed on to my work on the Starflight Handbook, which is about interstellar travel methods. And so I didn't go. And I'm fortunate I didn't go. This party occurred before their data, that is the MIT Plasma Fusion Center data, was even analyzed. They thought they killed Pons and Fleischmann on the neutron data in May, or earlier. They didn't think it was worthwhile studying the calorimetry. But look at this, my friends. And I got this data accidentally. When I first saw it in late 91, or I should say early 91, I was astonished. Look at this, raw data showing that the light water experiment, the control experiment with palladium, was pretty much null. It was a wash. But look at the heavy water. It's all above the curve. There's net power there. Doesn't mean cold fusion's proved, but it darn well says, go back and do the experiment. If it happens again like that, ooh, there might be something there. But they didn't want to do that, so 3 days later, they didn't all team up to do this. It was a lackey who did this, who would have been fired on the spot or thrown out if he had ever brought that data in that publishable form. So this is what they published instead in the Journal of Fusion Energy, which they edit at the Plasma Fusion Center. Talk about peer review. Kahn, what a great name, Kahn, C-O-N-N. Dr. Kahn was the editor of the Journal of Fusion Energy. And so this paper by 16 MIT authors, including Parker, published light water, null result, heavy water, null result, and it's completely fraudulent. Okay? I asked for investigation late 91, and they refused. They did a pro forma day investigation. They swept it under the rug. Dr. Mitch Swartz published a more extensive analysis of it, which shows that it's worse than just shifting the data down. I thought they just shifted the data down. They time averaged it appropriately into bins, but then they shifted it all down. It was worse. And Hal Fox, to his great credit, published the full paper in the August 92 Fusion Facts. I commend that article to you from Dr. Schwartz. There were many other strange things that happened. Just to show you the intensity of the cold fusion war, the former head of the physics department, Dr. Robert Bergenau, reacted this way when he heard that there were two former hot fusion scientists who had began to believe cold fusion and had a unique theory about it. They came to the campus, and he said, how do these flakes get on campus? In spite of the cold fusion war, the research continued. There was the Como, Italy conference, which I missed. There was the Nagoya, Japan conference, which I didn't miss. Sponsored by many Japanese organizations, by the way, and now there is $100 million for the next 4 years that is officially money for Japanese research in cold fusion, not 1 cent officially from the United States. There was the 4th International Conference at Maui, sponsored by EPRI, EPRI. Just to show you the power of media, and if Jim Griggs is here, or even if he's not, he well remembers that when, in August of 93, I guess it was, Popular Science published this article, Cold Fusion, Fact or Fancy. Yes, 93, August 93. Jerry Bishop of the Wall Street Journal wrote this. It triggered Griggs to call Jed Rothwell and I and say, you know, I got something that is similar to what you have. It's over unity, but I don't know whether to believe my results. Jed and I went down there. We didn't believe that a big machine, you know, with a 50 horsepower motor could possibly be over unity, but hell, we did the experiment ourselves with him. We weighed 350 pounds of water on a 1,000-pound scale. We dipped our thermometers in. We made sure there was no stratification by stirring it with brooms and things. And by God, the BTUs, which is just delta T captured in the barrel, was already over the electric input power as measured by 2 high-quality input meters. Of course, Griggs could have been a fraud, which he obviously isn't. He's selling this now. Results are coming in. And thus began the whole cavitation-induced excess heat thing, which might be due to the Casimir effect, might be due to tapping of zero-point energy, might be a nuclear reaction. Who the heck knows what it is? But we're selling machines now. He's selling machines, thank God. Okay, so that showed how the media And acknowledgement in the media can lead to new understandings, which is why it's so important to have magazines like our own and like Hal Fox's material and like what the Academy of New Energy is doing with its new publication. This is the cold fusion skeptic. They are dead. Forgot even where I got this. There's a professor at MIT by the name of Hermann Feshbach who was on the recent Nightline where they did the Patterson cell. It was on February 7th. For those of you, how many of you saw the Nightline in the Good Morning America that day? Okay, you should see it. We should play it at some point. Not today, not right here. But Hermann Feshbach, who had canceled, had an article of mine canceled, another reason I quit MIT as chief science writer, he said on that program, he said, look, I don't know anything about, and he looks roughly like this guy. Really, he had a bow tie and all, no bow tie there. He said, I don't know anything about the Patterson power cell, but I can tell you there are no nuclear reactions going on there. Well, they've been measured now, as Dennis Craven's indicated, and hopefully within the next month or two we'll see that data. Transmutations. Poor Herman. Edmund Storms, who's got much more credentials than I do, former Los Alamos National Laboratory scientist, he finally got an article into Technology Review. This was '94. But it was 3 years after it was supposed to be in. Mine was approved by the editor, but Hermann Feshbach killed it. That's what I was told by the editor. That was the dominant reason it was killed. I called Feshbach up. This was in '91, and this is what he said. He said, I've had 50 years of experience in nuclear physics. I know what's possible and what's impossible, and that's it. I said, would you read at least Dr. Storms's summary of the evidence in '91 and Dr. Srinivasan's evidence also reviewed of the Bhabha Atomic Research Center in India. He said, no, I will not listen to any more evidence. I won't look at it. It's all junk. And he hung up the phone. So he gets written into history for that remark. Right. No, I just hope I hope that Hermann Feshbach, John Maddox, Steve Jones, Parker, Petrasso, a whole bunch of I just hope they live long enough. Hi, Zenga, how could I forget? Live long enough to see that they were wrong and maybe apologize to the world. And then we'll forgive them, but not until they apologize for what they did. This was our first issue of the magazine. It was actually the second time we started a magazine because we were with another individual publisher who we had a falling out with. Different problems with that publisher, and it's some kind of a newsletter now, which I don't respect very much. But in any event, I now have, in effect, 9 issues of magazines on cold fusion since '94. And we do this on a shoestring. We are desperately in need of, not desperately, we're much in need of money. I teach school in order to help finance this. This was the second issue with the Patterson cell. This started, by the way, in April of March, April of 90, the magazine started March, April of '95. Hal Fox and I and Jed Rothwell and Chris Tinsley, we aspire to have some sort of larger thing going someday where we all join forces. There might still be parallel things. There's plenty of room for everybody here. Hal Fox is already our associate editor. And let's just make this bigger and better. It's already on the newsstands. This is the only cold fusion magazine on the newsstand, dominantly cold fusion. There is another one, but I think some other kind of society does it. They do good things too. I think we maintain a balance between acceptance and belief in evidence that is probably about the best going. We try anyway. We're not always correct. We've thought some things were the last word, and then we proved to ourselves they weren't, and we published the negative data. We are not afraid to publish negative data. And we are not afraid to publish the truth either. For example, Clean Energy Technologies has in fact been negotiating with the Motorola Corporation. They hinted about that broadly, and they referred to the cover of our recent issue, which has Motorola on it. We tell it like it is. Motorola did make them a big offer. Lots of figures. They rejected it. They wanted 100%. Should have been rejected. That's their Clean Energy Technologies Patterson Power Cell ad. We're in many states now, and most of Canada. Gene will tell me which bad provinces are not subscribing. Gene Manning, that is. my mirror reflection on the other side of the country. We are in many other countries, which I'm proud to say is expanding the knowledge of cold fusion. Hal, I know, his publications are all over the world. We added Israel recently. Very interestingly, an Israeli scientist at Carmel Olefins subscribed, okay? And immediately, the next day, I got a subscription from Germany with, it was obvious that this Israeli scientist had faxed to his German colleague, and so I got two for the price of one, in effect. Two new scientists brought into the field. Recently, we get calls on the phone and subscriptions all the time from senior engineers and scientists who are just waking up, and they want to know what's going on, and you tell them basically, and they're astonished, and they can't wait to get the magazine, and when they see it, they know that there's something there. You cannot look at all these things that are being published and say it's nonsense, unless you're Kevin Wolf of Texas A&M, who is a sad case. He had tritium and neutrons in the early days. The negative faction within EPRI paid him to kill cold fusion later on. There is a negative faction within EPRI. Now EPRI is pretty much out. Across the board cuts, so they don't even have a cold fusion program, really, except Tom Passel's being paid to study it. The Japanese are now funding SRI International, Japanese main organization. But Kevin Wolf was paid to kill it, but he found neutrons almost immediately upon adding boron, the magic pixie dust, to his cold fusion cells. So he got the neutrons, but they still, you know, so what? Low-level neutrons could be anything, but he believed they were real. Didn't publish it, though. Then, this was in '92, September. The radiological survey was going on in his laboratory, and they looked at 3 cathodes from a Pons-Fleischmann cell that he had run, 3 separate cells, and they were all radioactively hot. They found irrefutable evidence of isotope, radioactive, short-lived isotopes that could not have been added by any person, okay? And he believes, and to this day, Kevin Wolf believes 100% that that data is real, but he will not connect it with cold fusion. Don't know why. He just thinks, I suppose, that he was doing a cold fusion experiment and just happened to have cosmic ray interference. That's his explanation. But he was to give these results at the Maui conference. Mysteriously did not attend, even though he was a keynote speaker. And so we did, Tom Passel did him the favor of publishing it on a video presentation or slides in 1995 at the Monte Carlo conference. And we have it on tape. You can see all the gamma peaks. We traced it off the screen. And I think Hal Fox has published it in his new journal of is it New Energy? I've forgotten.
Journal of New Energy.
Journal of New Energy, a peer-reviewed journal. Here are some things happening. We'll go quickly now since we're nearing the limit here. The Pons-Fleischmann patent is about to be issued in Europe. There's still a war going on against it in the United States, so it's unlikely to be issued for quite a while in the US. But the Europeans are going to give that. Eneco owns the rights, Eneco of Salt Lake City. This was a letter that they got, okay, given to me by the principals of Eneco. There was the PowerGen conference, December, in which Clean Energy Technologies demonstrated their cell. They got 1,344 watts out, 1.4 watts in for a certain time. They reduced the power in to 0.1 watt, and they had 500 watts out in a certain cell with new bead design, by the way. They were there. Here's their booth. Jed Rothwell suggested we use the term feel the heat because you can really feel it. You know, it's a cell. It looks like a science fair project, but any one of these projects is far more advanced in its technology of measurement and so forth than Faraday's work or the Wright brothers' work or anyone else's work. It's a beautiful experiment, and if you put your face over here above the heat exchanger, you will feel a blast of hot air like a hairdryer, Jed described it. And it was only 1.4 watts going in at the time through the Patterson cell with 40 cubic centimeters of Patterson beads. There's a little closer. There was a control cell there that wasn't working well on that day. We wished Clean Energy Technology had done this more publicly and openly. We think if they had meters and they were showing it to all the fossil fuel people there, it would have been a home run. The whole story would be over now. And I know Dr. Cravens has been joking. I know he's not here. I think he left for some other place. He's a good guy. But we do have our disagreements. We'd like to see everyone have one of these cells to play with in their home. And they could make lots of money selling it or just sell the beads. But they want to kind of keep it under as they call it, strategic partnerships. My fear for them is that there are so many other systems coming out now that if they don't take advantage of this one window of opportunity, other things will look much better and they will be bypassed. But I think they will, you know, to their credit, they are the first to get into public visibility. I must say I'm proud that I was the one who called Dr. Michael Gillen back in December to alert him that this thing was going on at PowerGen. He followed the story. There was some resistance by Clean Energy Technologies to let him cover it, but they did it on Nightline finally, and Good Morning America on the same day. Dr. Craven showed you the Motorola results. He didn't put it as Motorola, but it was Motorola. In essence, they ignited the cell, got it going with a delta T of about 15 degrees centigrade at a flow rate of 20 milliliters per minute. And as you all can calculate, by the specific heat of water, that is about 20 watts, but there was no input power. They turned the input power off. When was the last time you saw a light bulb that stayed hot without current going into it, 20-watt light bulb, for 14 hours? Tell me about it. Anyone who doesn't believe that experiment upon being shown Motorola data, well, I'm sorry for them. Mizuno in Japan with his transmutations. There are other things going on, such as the Cincinnati group, which we published a little bit about. They haven't released things yet, but there's a tile that's melted right through. It looks like a high-temperature cold fusion process. The tile, through this mysterious ingredient that they use, I can't reveal it, I'm under non-disclosure. I hope they'll be more public. We don't know if it's over Unity for sure. We would need some research money to prove it for sure, but it looks like it's over Unity. It uses very specific materials. It doesn't work if those specific materials aren't used. If it were an ordinary mistake of electricity somehow melting a tile, I think that it wouldn't happen the way it does. We have Gunnerman, whom I now draw an analogy with this Paul Pantone's work. I mean, he's mixing water with fuel, putting nickel catalysts in combustion chambers of cars and buses and everything else, and getting much more mileage. That's the Gunnerman process. Maybe Pantone will come into the fold soon. That's the SciEx magnet, which scooter, it says powered by SciEx magnet. To me, look, I don't know whether this is for sure real as far as its over Unity ability, or whether the film, there's only two possibilities, as Chris Tinsley said. It's either fraud, which I can't imagine, but you know, one of the two possibilities, either some sort of fraudulent demonstration on the videotape, not that Hal was part of, but that Takahashi concocted for us in his later days, or it's the real thing. It's one or the other. It's not just some misinterpretation. I mean, the battery was removed, for those of you who didn't see it, and the motor kept going, generating electricity through the alternator. The magnets have been measured. They are over 100 MGOE. So why would a man who has US patents and all sorts of other good things, why would he be concocting fraudulent schemes if he didn't really have it? I think he has it. But let's get the data finally first. Yeah, that's other examples in history have occurred. The Wright brothers were ignored for 5 years after they flew. It was only 1908 when it was acknowledged that they really had flown, even though they were flying in broad daylight. There was, on Huffman Prairie, read the book, read their autobiography by McGee or McAfee, something like that. The authorized biography of the Wright brothers, it is astonishing. It's almost a repeat, except you wouldn't think it would happen in this day of big media. You would think some of the journalists would break away, but I guess they didn't, and they're still pack mentality people. Goddard was ignored in his time when he launched the world's first liquid fuel rocket. And I studied nuclear rockets, and I have nuclear rockets on the brain. The Germans in World War II copied his work, and that led to the V2. And of course, we know it led to the whole space age. I'll just finish off here because I'm overstepping my welcome. This is how I see the whole thing. There's a hierarchy of heresies. You can't see that. Hierarchy of heresies. Cold fusion, this is proved. Excess thermal energy, nuclear scale. I'm not saying it's nuclear, but it's nuclear scale or beyond. When hydrogen isotopes, that's just proved. 100% certain. Zero doubt in my mind about that. Nuclear products at low level, generally non-commensurate with the excess energy, but we don't even know that. But it's certainly proved. That's proved. Cavitation-generated X-power, unless Jim Griggs has pulled off one of the biggest cons in history, that's proved. Heavy element transmutation at low energy, can you get low-level production? I think that's proved. Can you remediate isotopes? I think you can. I'm not as certain about that. Can we commercially produce isotopes? I strongly suspect we will be able to, because every technological process that starts off very small usually gets scaled up. And this is where cold fusion meets new energy. And I define new energy as energy that has nothing to do, apparently, with hydrogen isotopes. Over-unity motors, electric generators, and the like. I am pretty close to a true believer in those. And forgive me if I'm not a true believer yet, but I'm pretty close. I made some predictions back then, which came out pretty accurately. Back in '94, I said that there would be prototypes within 6 to 12 months. I was right, according to I didn't know it would be CT. Home heating system prototype, almost right, because the Patterson cell, quite frankly, you get 10 or 20 of those working together at a kilowatt, and you can heat your home in New Hampshire or anywhere, okay? Electric generator by December of '96, very likely in my opinion, but not certain. By the way, we've left out Randall Mills of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Let me tell you the inside information that we got by virtue of our studies. This is published in the latest issue. They have cells that have nothing to do with electrolysis. They just have no electric input power. They just heat it up, and they take the heat away, the electricity that heats it up, then they leave it there. Hydrogen is undergoing some catalytic reaction at the surface of a double catalyst, and they are melting steel with it. They had an accidental steel chamber meltdown at high pressure. Remember, no electric input power, just a cell that stays hot. They have 60 investors. They are going to come out, they say, their internal report, which was not marked confidential, it says that they hope to have a kilowatt electric generator within the next 9 to 18 months. And what can we say? It's happening. It's like the Piantelli device in Italy, too. There will be massive crow eating. The messengers will be blamed. The era of excuses begins, an attempt to rewrite history. They will not succeed because truth will out. We have too many good writers, far better than they are, writing about it. Those who've written against cold fusion already will be so demoralized they won't even have the heart to rewrite the story. Some of them will try, like the head of the American Physical Society propaganda office, Robert Park. He'll explain why he was such a buffoon these past few years. There will be a cold fusion powered car prototype by 2000. I think that's way off. It'll be much before then, whether it's a go-kart or whatever it is. Dennis won't admit this, but Dennis Cravens aspires to drive the little car from Cloudcroft, New Mexico, and park it in front of the patent office and call Harvey Barrand out to see it. Tokamak hot fusion program will be terminated. I was wrong on that one. Stupidity will go on for a long time. Okay, they will continue to get $240 million a year of your money for something that is totally useless. It will never be built. It could be built, but it will never be built. I hope they kill it in the coming year. I'm afraid of what's going to happen financially to oil companies, although perhaps we shouldn't be so concerned about that. They're not always the best actors. But there could be enormous chaos if this thing is introduced suddenly. Remember now, it's going to be a sudden arising now from the grave of an allegedly dead technology. And it's just going to hit like this, boom. And it only is going to take one media outlet, mainstream, not Infinite Energy or Fusion Facts, one of them to say, my God, it's real. Look at the implications. And that'll do it, my friends. Everyone will be able to see. And then the recriminations will start. The electric power grid will wither. Gradual end of all fossil fuel production. Probably within, I would say, if things go according to plan within the next 20 years or so, we can just plan on having no fossil fuel combustion at all, except for nice fires that we'll have in New Hampshire. You'll probably have to take a license out or something. No, I hope not. Phase out of fission power, 2 new books by me and others. Why MIT Slept. And cold fusion is the mother of all anomalies. Will it be not to quote Saddam Hussein or whoever said that other mother of all, what was it, mother of all wars or something? Battles. Is that what he said? Okay. Will there be business as usual? I don't know. Maybe. Maybe not. Widespread rejection of establishment science? I sure hope so. Now, it's not that, now let's be clear on this. I am a scientist and an engineer. I believe in the methods, the good methods used by science and the biotechnology, physics, and other communities. They do achieve very interesting understandings. The problem is that their threshold of acceptance is far too high, and the other problem is they have blinders on and they refuse to look at anomalies that totally upset the apple cart. They don't like that. Will there be increased acceptance of other anomalies? I think, and I hope so, a new metaphor will enter the language. And last but not least, we will have the sinking of the Titanic of the opposition to new energy and cold fusion.